Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Sanjeev Goel from Peak Cannabis, and I'm so excited about our first ever episode, and we have some amazing guests today. We have Gerald and James from CFAMM, and my colleague Sandra, and I'll leave them to introduce themselves.
Hi. Hi, thanks Dr. Goel. It's really a pleasure to be here. My name is Sandra Couto. I'm a clinical pharmacist, and I work closely with patients in the community setting.
Gerald Major, so I have a few different roles. Overall, I'm a patient. I live with ankylosing spondylitis and psoriatic arthritis, so I do a lot of advocacy in the arthritis space. And my role here today is with CFAMM, so I'm the Vice President of Canadians for Fair Access to Medical Marijuana.
And I'm James O'Hara, President and CEO of Canadians for Fair Access to Medical Marijuana, or CFAMM. I'm a patient myself, and we're here to talk about lots of exciting patient-related issues today.
Awesome, thank you so much. And you know, I thought this is a very timely discussion. I had a chance to meet Gerald and James a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, my God, it's so good to hear from actual people patients who are using cannabis, to understand what are the types of challenges we're facing. I mean, sometimes as a physician, I'm prescribing cannabis, but I don't really know what's really going on. And I'd like to, that's why I've kind of brought them onto the show and got Sandra's viewpoint as well, to really get a sense of what's happening out there. You know, because cannabis is changing, medical cannabis is changing the landscape right now, completely in healthcare. And we want to figure out, you know, what are the type of roadblocks that are happening, what's the good stuff that's happening, make sure that we get your feedback as well on this show, and we can move things forward.
And really to support patients, right?
Yeah, for sure.
How do we mobilize healthcare professionals to really get behind supporting patients and ensuring that they have the best strains, the best doses to specifically treat their symptoms, right? So there's a huge opportunity, a gap, but a huge opportunity, I think.
Yeah. Which is great, because that's exactly what patients need. And you know, you touched on the strain selection part of it. That really is a bit of a challenge, and certainly in terms of the affordability part of it too. So we know that you folks are actually working on that and have some good testing processes available today, which is great. That's really going to help patients. So we're really interested to hear about that today, and I'm sure our patients watching are as well.
Yeah.
So what's the number one thing you're hearing from people about difficulties with accessing medical cannabis? What's the number one issue?
Yeah, so if you think about access is a bit of an umbrella term, and under access you can think about affordability. So really the number one thing is affordability, and the most pressing component of affordability really is taxes today. That is a significant issue, because taxes are adding a lot to the cost. So roughly about 60% of patients underdose today simply because of cost.
Right. Can you give us a sense to our viewers of what does it cost? I mean, there might be people who never tried medical cannabis and are wondering, how much does it actually cost?
Can I give a range?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so for the average patient that can have relief on small doses, then I mean, you're probably talking in the range of $20 a day, which is, I mean, that's a smoking habit, or that's a drinking habit, right?
Yeah. And does that encompass all of the different dosages?
Then that's where it gets tricky,
Okay.
right? Then you start to, if you're a true medical patient, and I mean, like someone like me that's on $110,000 a year in pharmaceuticals, and gradually coming down from that, it's like, I need big doses, I need high doses, I need different forms of administration. So that's, I mean, it's just completely unaffordable. Right. To get to the diseases like AS or psoriatic arthritis, or just aggressive diseases in general, it's just so hard to get at, because a patient is first having to navigate, try to find all this stuff, buy different types of apparatuses. I just came off of September 1st, I kind of took it upon myself to start testing strains and trying to find strains that would work for me. So I've done many strains since September 1st, and some of them, quite frankly, they're throwaway. They don't work for me. They may work for someone else, but how does a patient that already can't afford their medication, how do they, I've come down 75% off my opioids in the last 2 years. And
opioids
that costs,
are pain medicines, narcotic pain medications.
So that costs me money.
That's great.
Every time I do stuff like that, it costs me money. All these strain selections that I go through, it's costing me money. Not all strains are going to work for me, so quite honestly, I mean, there's certain strains there that I have that I won't use the rest, because either the effect is not what I want or it's actually negative.
Mm-hmm.
So we're asking patients to navigate this whole system, piece it all together, quarterback their healthcare team for, you know,
That
for once in
circle
their
of
lives.
care.
I mean, that whole circle of care is actually
Yeah.
very present right now in
Absolutely.
patients.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't all have the tools in which to do that, right? So I try to get on the street and the grounds, and I'm fortunate enough to have access to these types of things. So I try to figure it out myself. And then people like you come along and actually try
We've
to
got
figure it out.
some great tools, yeah.
Yeah, with tests. So all this kind of stuff helps, but in cannabis specifically, it's very much, you said when you came on, is that you want to close the loop and understand what's actually happening after
Yes.
you prescribe. And
Yes.
and I feel the same way because I want to know how you're prescribing. So we're very much active in this in our care, medical cannabis patients, and we need this type of support. So this is fantastic.
And I think the other key point, going back to the actual cost part of it, yeah,
Yeah.
as Gerald said, it can range anywhere. If a patient has a lowish dose, it
Like
can
half a
range
gram
from
to 1
it
gram
can
a
range
day.
from a couple $100 a month to maybe $1,000 and possibly more.
Wow.
But the really important part too is not just, you know, the amounts. The fact is that for the most part, and I'm talking 98% of patients out there today, don't get medical cannabis covered by their insurance.
Right.
So it's completely out of pocket, right? And that really is a significant challenge, which again is forcing patients to underdose in order to meter their dose throughout the months.
Yeah, I've had a number of patients come to me and said, you know what, I've had to come off my cannabis because I couldn't afford
Yeah,
it, and I've had to
right.
go back onto my pain medication
Right.
because I guess can't afford it.
Exactly.
And you know,
And we're in the middle of an opioid crisis. I
Exactly.
mean, we
Right.
understand
Yeah.
that's wrong.
right.
And I
But,
think that
but to your point, though, I think if we can start to collect some of the clinical evidence that is documented in clinics like
For
Spark,
sure.
where we're collecting clinical outcomes of patients who are on medical cannabis, and then using that data to influence policy decision makers, insurance companies, that real world evidence is actually going to be very, very important, especially in this space, because, you know, doing a real RCT, randomized clinical trial in cannabis is probably, you know,
Right.
not going to happen. So I think, to your point, I think that's going to evolve and change, and hopefully we can start to use the clinical evidence to really get patients
for sure.
access under their insurance.
And that's a terrific point, because that's what we hear most often as well, is the insurance companies are looking for something. I mean, they don't really have a reference point because it's still kind of new, and they're kind of challenged to have that comparison and hard data on what's actually happening,
How
how
should-
it's helping a patient.
Yeah.
So anything that you can do in order to support that case for a patient to then to apply for coverage is huge.
How can a person go? Let's say if they want to find out if they have coverage, how should they do that? To just contact their insurance company, or how should they make
Yep.
the case
So-
that hey, this is important, this is going to get covered or not?
Right. So
How do you do
there's
that?
a number of different ways that you can do it. What we tell patients straight off,
Yes.
but the easiest thing, frankly, is depending on what your insurance plan is, but oftentimes insurance plans will have HSA or health spending accounts.
Right.
Health spending,
So
yeah.
that's right. So we would encourage patients to first of all tap into their health spending account. That's a very discretionary pool
Yeah.
that got allocated to them.
Right.
And after that, talk to the insurance company in terms of what they need.
Maybe I'll
and
just
they
take a
can-
little
Sure.
something about the health spending account. So there's it's a special,
Right.
basically a free for all account that you have some ability to spend on what you want.
Correct. And it's the easiest way to get coverage.
And
frankly,
sometimes it's
because
about
you're already-
$1,500
Yeah,
dollars
yeah,
a year,
yeah,
right? So you
yeah,
can use
yeah,
that to
yeah,
discretionary funding.
Exactly. And the point there too is there's a lot of patients who don't know that they can do that.
Correct.
Right.
Right?
yeah.
So we really want to communicate that and let them know that, look, it's available to you, you know? Maybe, it depends on what kind of coverage you have, but certainly check it first.
Right. Have we already talked about? Do we have a time pressure to do this test here?
No, I
Is
think
this,
we
Is
should.
it already gone? Has the test already gone?
We've done one, but I think we could maybe do one if you're up for doing a
Sure,
test.
sure.
Gerald, you mentioned about strain selection and that you had just gone through having a number of different strains. And how did you do that? You personally, did you use a test, or did you just do that on your own to figure out which strains actually worked for you? Were you doing it for therapeutic benefit, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's completely that. I mean, the more you're into your treatment plans, I mean, you look for everything. So it's not just cannabis I'm looking for. It's all the little things. When I talk to people, I like to understand the one or two things that they like to do, because I want to take those, right? I've got my 2 or 3 different things that I share with people, right? And the thing about it is, today's patient needs a lot of tools, right? Just as we respond differently to different medications, we respond differently to different treatment options, right? So I need thousands of tools, and maybe I'm going to end up using 20 of them.
Right.
But so the whole strain selection is I still haven't been happy with my health. There's still something missing in these places, and when you have a physical condition with a mental condition and you're using cannabis, it's very, very tricky, because what's good for pain may not be great for anxiety. So if I can find strains of cannabis with compounds in them, and if I can take the secondary compounds and make those the compounds or the terpenes that are gonna help my mental, then I find I can still attack my pain hard with a high THC, but not suffer mentally from it, right?
Okay.
And then I started finding that I'd actually get an uplift on my mental at the same time as handling my pain. So this is
that what they call the entourage effect? Is that what they call that? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, full plant extraction, as much as you can get in a plant, is probably going to work out better. And then if you can understand those different compounds, and we kind of understand from patient lived experiences and patient reported outcomes, we know certain things are better for certain things, right? So if you can just be smart around your selection, it'll end up saving you money, and it'll end up making your treatments much better.
And I think,
well, we're
just to add to that too, I think the other tricky part is that, as patients, oftentimes we're kind of forced into understanding what's behind the chemovar and what the terpene profile is and so on. So there's a kind of sometimes a bit of a technical layer to it that some patients just don't want to deal with. They don't want to really get into the sort of bits of it all and understanding how everything's working. So anything that helps direct them into a certain strain or a certain area is really cool.
And even for the physicians, right? I mean,
That's right.
having to choose all of the various strains and by their names, it's really hard. So this is really exciting. This tool is something that is being offered at Spark Cannabis.
Yeah.
Did you want to
I think we should talk about this for a few minutes. And I think we should, even for the viewers, make sure there's any questions out there. We should take them. And I think some of the words we're using, I wonder if some of our viewers may have some questions about. But I think first here about this test we have is that, to help with the strain selection, now the genetic testing is available that to see, whether you're at risk of a memory problem when you're taking cannabis, whether you're at risk of psychosis. We know that in younger people, that's why we're, we have somewhat of a contraindication to give people cannabis under 25, is because, in younger people, they could be more at risk of psychosis. And now we know that if you have a certain genotype, a certain gene, then that puts you at that risk. So we have a test for that. And the other one is whether or not you're a fast or slow metabolizer for THC. So we're going to do that test now. Who's going to do the test here?
I think James is going to do it.
Okay.
I just need to get gloves. Can I just grab some gloves? Okay. So there's 3 swabs here because we're measuring 3 different enzymes, as Dr. Goyle mentioned. The first one is the cytochrome P450C 2C9, and that's the enzyme that is responsible for metabolizing THC. And so depending on how you come back in your test, you're normal or moderate or high.
Definitely not normal.
Yeah. We'll have to caution you on which strains. The second one is the AKT1, which again, as Dr. Goyle was mentioning, is a marker for psychosis. So predisposes you to psychosis, and then if you add the effects of something like THC, it certainly increases your risk. And the third one is the COMT, and that is responsible for associated with memory loss.
When you're using.
So when you're using it,
Exactly.
I think it's important.
This is all part of the cumulative effect of THC.
So is that why there's
three
different swabs?
Yep.
Okay.
And the test can be done at the clinic, and the nurse would be assessing the patient who comes in, depending on, when they do the evaluation, if they are a high risk, if the nurse feels that, maybe they've had a a history of, psychiatric disorders. They may want to, maybe adolescents. So it really will be a very discretionary decision, but it is going to be made available for all patients at Spark. And so what I'm going to ask you to do, James, is I'm going to ask you to just take that blue cap off, and then it's a buccal test, so it's measuring in your saliva. So you're going to put it in your mouth, and you're going to swab perpendicular up and down 3 times, and then you're going to close the lid back.
Okay.
And we're going to repeat it for the second one.
Thank you.
There you go. And the test is, you can wait for the test results in the office, or you can come back once the results come back, and then the nurse will go over it with you and decide on what strains best suit you. The test
Gotcha.
takes 45 minutes, but again, that, I think the nurse is working through that in terms of appointment times and follow-up times. So, and we are currently offering it right now. We've had some really great feedback.
So that's pretty fast turnaround. Like
So that's it.
45 minutes you can do, and then we get the results.
Right, so I'm gonna ask the
That's
nurse,
pretty
Jean.
Hi, Jean.
Jean?
Come on over. So I think the takeaways from this is that we have a
Thanks,
test,
Jean.
a genetic test that should be done in the clinic. And if you're, it's been offered in our clinic, but probably at other clinics as well eventually. And the real amazing thing about this, it's going to help direct your provider, your doctor or clinician, to decide, what level of THC is safe for you. Like if you're a slow metabolizer of THC, then you're going to want to not take such a high dose of THC. If you're a person who is at a higher risk of psychosis on cannabis, then you should not probably be taking a high high THC strain as well, and same with the memory loss as well. So there's some real value here by looking at how can we tailor your prescription according to your genetic makeup.
That's great.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what a good or fast metabolizer or a slow metabolizer is? What does that mean?
Okay, so basically, like for every chemical in your body, as it comes in, THC is one of those. As it comes in, our body goes through a kind of a detox. Like it converts it and then you pee it out or get rid of it from your body, and that's dependent on certain enzymes. Like these are things that just are going out there and cleaning out your blood in a way.
Your system, basically.
Yeah, so the liver is primarily responsible for that, but there's different places in the body where this occurs. And so depending on your makeup, are you a person who gets rid of this quickly or gets rid of it slowly? If it's getting rid of it slowly, then it's sticking around a lot and it's building up quicker.
Oh, I see.
So there's people like, for example, who have, they're fast metabolizer for codeine and they're slow metabolizer for codeine. It means that the same pain medication doesn't work as good on somebody as it works on somebody else.
Right.
This happens for all medications, not just cannabis.
So how does that translate into dosing then? If somebody's a slow metabolizer, what does that mean? And if they're high, what does that mean?
Well, we have just guidelines, and in fact, what I'm saying is that we're not going to likely give 5 grams a day to somebody who's a slow metabolizer.
Right.
Like we're going to start with half a gram.
Right.
I think it's just
So-
good for the person to know it themselves.
So
Sure,
this,
sure.
as I see it from a patient perspective, this test now will allow us to get rid of some of this. So the kind of the saying around the industry has always been start slow and or start low and go slow.
Yes.
Okay, well if you have
If you're a fast
metabolizer
Yeah.
that's in chronic pain.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, the typical thing that you hear is you come in, you get a dose of medication, and you're told to come back in 3 months. Well, that 3 months is living hell
Yeah.
Right.
for someone in
Yeah.
chronic pain.
Right.
So they may not make it to 3 months. They may bail and go back to
Opiates.
opioids.
Like they give
Yeah.
up. They say it didn't
Exactly.
work.
It
Yeah.
didn't work for me.
Second,
Exactly.
so I mean, this is going to help some people, and certainly, I mean, start slow, or low and go slow is just good in general, because then you're not going to over impact those people that can't tolerate it.
Right.
But you need to do something for the other people that maybe
Right.
can. The other thing I see in this maybe is when you start to say about how fast you metabolize. So this would have, depending on if you're a fast or slow metabolizer, this would have an impact on driving
Yeah.
and working
For sure.
and impairment.
It's
Is
important,
that right?
Yeah. It's
Because you hear patients talk about, well, I can use cannabis and within 10 minutes I can drive and I'm not impaired. I'm more impaired by my arthritis.
Possible.
And you have other people that certainly shouldn't be driving. So this is getting us a lot closer to where patients want to be. This is the frustration zone that's existed for far too long
Yeah.
in
And I think the
patient care.
physicians too, right? I think it's
For
going to
sure.
help them make informed
Right.
decisions and get
Right.
comfortable in terms of having that discussion with patients. You know, there are a lot of physicians out there who still are not comfortable about having that
I think-
discussion.
And it is because the unknown. Like ultimately,
Right.
I have seen patients of mine who are 17 who went and had psychosis.
Yeah.
So then I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, then I
Right.
shouldn't ever give it to
Yeah.
anybody
Right.
who's
Yeah.
17. Well, that's
Yeah.
not true.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
You know, there are
Right.
lots of young people who need it, and
And-
they don't go to psychosis.
And if there still are physicians who really don't want to
Right.
get behind it, then Spark is here to help support them in that journey. And we, you know, the offerings at the clinic will include genetic testing. It will look at dosing considerations. It will look at strain selection. So, this is great for patients and for the clinicians.
And the others, there is a flip side to this too. Sometimes we hear from patients who have started medical cannabis, and all of a sudden, you know, they say, hey, it's a bit too much for me. Even if I altered my dosage, it was
Yep.
still a lot, and they oftentimes quit.
Right.
But this will help those folks as well in that sort of percentage,
Exactly.
because oftentimes they then go back to pharma or opioids or
Right.
whatever it is. Whereas it could have been a good option for them with the right strain and the
Right.
right dosing, right?
Right.
So that's one of the things that I look for as well.
I
It's
think
not
you want to
just
make
what it's gonna
that
do, but
first
help them as
experience
well.
positive, because
sure.
if
You-
that
you
first
have to.
experience,
You have to.
if it's not
You have to.
positive, then that patient is
You have
really,
to.
yeah, for the physician and for the patients,
Yeah,
right?
for sure,
So,
for sure.
yeah.
One thing I want to just jump back to, we're talking about strains, and even for myself to understand this a little bit, like normally physicians prescribe like, okay, we want you to take a sativa or indica or hybrid strain, and I hope I'm using the right nomenclature, and leave it to the patient to go and select
Right,
that
right, right,
from all the various
Right.
LP websites.
Right,
So
right.
tell me a little bit about your experience. You know, how reliable is it for patients to go and look at those descriptions of what those strains do? And how, you know, is that something to go by, or how does, I know you said it's difficult, you have to do a lot of testing.
So this is why I do this and what I do. I mean, my previous life, I used to run hedge fund services for North America Citibank. I mean, so I go at things very kind of structured and
Methodical.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And so when I see this problem come up, then I immediately start to try to figure out how I can resolve it. And when others won't do things for you, then you should just do it yourself. But the knowledge that I've gained, someone would say it's been a waste. I mean, it's been a lot of fun. It's been, I mean, there is a rec part of cannabis. What other treatment option, what other medication do people enjoy taking this much? We spend money in
If you can
tests
afford
on
it.
compliance
That's-
in pharma, right? I mean, there's not a compliance issue here, really. That's why I kind of pieced it together, because when you get into something like this, the stuff that you learn that you're not expecting to learn is information that's going to now help other people do these tests. And when I see these tests, now I can take the knowledge of 100 strains in the last 3 months and really it means something, and you can actually put it into practice.
So how does, like, okay, so you've done it, not everybody has the ability or
So
the
I
thing.
mean-
How does someone take the knowledge from your
What
brain
I would do, I mean,
and get it out there? Like, that's a problem, right? Like,
It is.
Yes,
It is.
yes.
It is.
like
It
there's
is.
no
And-
data, and I mean, we're working with
Yeah.
some other companies out there that are trying to collect patient data
Yeah.
and give it back
Yeah.
in some type of aggregated manner.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
but right now that doesn't exist, right? Like, there's nobody who has this.
well, I mean,
That's
you know,
collected.
strain print's doing
Yes.
something similar.
That's right.
right?
That's what I'm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I wasn't.
so
I
mean,
wasn't
it's-
mentioning by name.
It's
but
really kind
yeah.
of taking that. I just like to do things myself.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just really a crowdsourced
Yeah.
kind of. So when you've got arthritis pain or inflammation pain
Mm-hmm.
or eye pain or whatever, I mean, you just follow those people. You run reports, follow the reports, see what strains they're using, and then you can kind of, you got to bring it down to the compounds. Because then once you know the compounds, you can build that back up into your strains.
How does a patient again? How do they go and get that information? Let's say from strain. Let's say I've just given somebody, go and get yourself an indica strain, 1 gram a day. Go to this website. How do they go and now pick which one?
Do they go to the LPs? Do they go to? is
Usually
there
we
a
have
place-
to. I have to prescribe.
Yeah.
a
Right.
particular
So
ingredient.
where would they?
Yeah.
How
you
do they
know,
get the information? Which one?
Yeah, so you're typically going to guide them at least a
Yeah.
bit, and they're going to go to their licensed producer,
Yes.
and they'll understand at least roughly what they're looking for. But a lot of it beyond that, frankly, is back to the same thing. It's trial and error.
Trial and error.
But the other really important point here, when you look at it from a patient point of view, is so they're a patient for a reason. They're dealing with their underlying condition.
Right.
The last thing that they want to do is put a lot of effort into, what do I do, right? So even if this takes them into the area where they can narrow it down a bit, is exceptionally helpful.
Okay.
Because patients are primarily suffering, and they're looking for a solution, and they need help to get to that solution. Very important.
So each LP is going to have their patient support program, right? And they have
And
people
their
you can
clinics and
call,
so on.
and those people are
Yeah.
experienced and they've seen
Yeah,
this
they
stuff.
know.
But I look at it as if back in the day, if I were to go into a dispensary and I would be asking someone for this type of information, and that was the risk for me in dispensaries, because sometimes it would be great information and sometimes it would just be horrible.
So Gerald, you're calling it a dispensary. Are you calling that like a pharmacy? Because I know I've heard this.
No, it's the,
right, but I think a lot of
So-
people confuse dispensaries with pharmacies, and they're not. And we
No.
need to maybe educate people on what that is, because
So I mean, a dispensary really is an illegal place to get medical cannabis. I mean, it filled a need when,
Right.
for
have
years, I mean, we've had a medical program for 20 plus years in Canada. So, I mean, they were part of the fabric
Yes.
in the
Right.
beginning. So when I talk about them, I kind of want to take the current LP legal avenue in Canada with their support program
Okay.
would be the equivalent to what I've spent the last 20 years in,
Dispensary.
talking to people and finding out which compound, which strain, which whatever. But I mean, in those methods, it's 50-50 on what kind of information you're going to get, and people need accurate information. We talk about the first-time user of cannabis.
Yeah.
If we make it a horrible experience for them, it could be like me needing a Percocet and taking, or even worse, let's say I need an antidepressant
Yeah.
med, and I take a Percocet instead. I mean, that's dangerous, right? I mean, that's not something that you would want to do. So it's the same thing with cannabis, because the beauty of the plant is that it's so complex and it can treat so many different things, but that's also the difficulties or the challenges from a patient's perspective, because there's so many different things. It's how
Right.
do you box it in? But
well, I mean, if
I think you just remind me of something too. It goes back to even if another patient has condition X and it's the same condition as you,
Yes.
and they use strain Y,
It might
it
work.
doesn't mean to say that strain is going to work for you. So it goes
Correct.
back to the personalized medicine part of it,
Correct.
where you have to know what works for you. So having that data is useful, but only up to a point.
So
You've
points.
got to focus on yourself,
That's right.
and that's what I found too.
So it really is it's still
very
we have an
personalized.
open
For sure.
field right now. Like
For
it's
sure,
not
for sure.
we don't have so
For
much
sure.
guidance.
So I'm
tools
curious-
like this will help a lot.
As
Yeah.
patients now, are, and as new tools are emerging, and we're talking about medical cannabis, as patients, are you finding it more comfortable now to disclose to your other healthcare professionals, part of your circle of care? Are you having those discussions more readily? Are you getting the support you need, or is there still that, I'm not going to tell this doctor, but I'm going to tell this
Yeah.
doctor? And just from a patient perspective, it'd be interesting to hear.
So we hear from patients that run every variation of that.
Right.
It's very unique. It depends on who their doctor is, what they specialize in, whether they're there with it or not. So it's highly variable to every single patient. And you run the gamut of patients disclosing and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, it's fine. And by the way, I think generally that's getting better.
Okay,
The stigma's
good.
reducing,
Yes.
Yeah.
but it's by far not there yet. And there's other doctors who don't want to hear about it, they frown on it, so on. And that's really the other issue when it comes to patients. And as the demographic ages,
We're going to take that question in a second.
Oh, sure.
Okay, thanks, Teresa. We're going to take your question in a second.
and as that patient ages, what becomes really important as well, going back to the sharing of info, is understanding what the contraindication potentially
Right.
is of medical cannabis with my blood pressure meds, with my whatever.
Right.
And that's why we also advocate, by the way, for the role of pharmacists in this as well, is because there's that knowledge gap also.
Absolutely,
So anything we can
absolutely.
do to help patients in those areas is really important.
Absolutely.
So let's take this question from Teresa. Very difficult to understand which strain to use for relief of. That's a hard one.
Relief
So,
of- relief of
relief
what
of
is a
what?
start?
Relief
Relief of
of
what?
pain.
Yeah,
I
is that
believe
pain?
she means. But
Or
I
is
think
it
that's
anxiety?
exactly the question we're saying. So I want to ask one question about that. So this term of indica, sativa, and hybrid, does it even have any meaning? I was reading an article that there's been so much cross, pollination of these plants that these terms have no real meaning.
Yeah.
Is that true? Like, what? And is one looking at the actual name of the WAPA versus something, diesel or whatever? Like, is one looking for those types of names, or is one looking at these other?
Really, the terpene
characterization?
profile is
Yeah.
more important.
Terpene
I'd
profile.
say than the actual strain name.
And why
Okay.
is that?
It's-
Why is
Well,
that?
it's going to give you the real combination of terpenes that are going to help you in whatever you have, and
Right.
that's personally what I look at more and more. And the names have become cryptic, right? So, in some cases, again, it may be reasonable, but in others, it's just not. So, that whole terpene profile is becoming really,
So I
really
think
important.
So
But
go ahead.
as well though, I mean, for the most part, I still use indica sativa. I mean,
Yeah,
in
generally,
my
for sure.
framework,
In your
right? I
framework,
mean,
yeah.
For sure.
I've gotten to the point now where I kind of common denominator is compounds and terpenes,
Mhm.
right? So I'll look for those and then build them back up. And if you can't build a strain that's exactly what you want, I mean, I mix strains quite
Right.
often, right?
Right.
But
That's
yeah,
what patients
I mean,
do.
Yeah.
Right.
Often.
And so we have another question from Linda. Some people are still afraid to speak about or not comfortable to admit they use cannabis.
And what can we do to help patients?
What type of support?
What can we do to sort of break down that barrier or that wall
Well,
for
those
patients?
some of those are, just behavioral, certain kind of your personality, or I mean, maybe you're a private person or
Right.
whatever. But I started telling my doctors, and I was afraid to tell. I wasn't afraid. I think they would care to know.
Cautious.
Cautious?
But then
That's a
when I
good word.
actually I started with my family doctor, and I was ready to go to a lawyer, get pay for forms to be filled out.
Wow.
And this is someone that's been around cannabis for quite a while, but this was 3 years ago or so. And I mentioned it to him just because I was just wanting to be careful around contraindications, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, yeah, bring in the forms. So that was, pleasant experience. Then I said, okay, well, I'm going to open it up to everyone because everyone should know. And for some of the ones that I thought I was going to get a different reaction, it was pretty pleasant.
It's sort of like coming out.
It was my rheumatologist was next, and she said, you know what, I don't understand it. Knock yourself out. But that's supportive.
Yes.
And that's the same thing that I got from my rheumatologist in Toronto, part of UHN. It was, I don't really know anything about it, but I have no issues with it. And so the good thing is that now they've seen progression from opioids to cannabis,
Right.
and they see the health benefits and they see the outcomes.
And I think that's actually
that's
the,
We got
some clarity on the
key is,
question.
Gerald's right, is that, if you're having a positive experience and it really worked for you, you share that. Because
Right.
the more you share it, the more people
Right.
see the benefits of it and you can
Absolutely.
get it.
Absolutely.
So it's helpful.
Right.
I thought I saw
So we
relief
got
of pain.
we got the tail
Yeah.
end of
Yeah.
that, and that's
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see
that's a
that.
relief of pain. So
Yeah.
do you want me to start
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah, I think that's about the what.
Yeah, so
how
I
would
mean,
you- what type
this
of
is
advice
exactly
would
what I deal with, right? This is right in my wheelhouse. So I mean, the important thing really to ask, I think, in this is there a mental health component to this,
The pain.
right? And if there's not, and it's just purely pain, then for me personally, I'd want to know if I'm a fast metabolizer or not.
you give? Which we're going to find out soon.
We are,
Hopefully
right?
very
But knowing
Exciting.
already that
10
I
more
can
minutes.
tolerate, so that means I'm probably a fast.
If you can tolerate, then
If
yeah.
I can.
Yeah, then
You're
you're fast.
fast.
But I
Faster.
also get effect. It's
Yeah,
not.
no, still.
So for me, I would want to go very high THC. That's exactly what I do, and I try to go as high on that side of it to hit my pain. And then when I get into the sativa indica stuff, I still kind of use sativa during the day. It doesn't burn me out. It's
So,
uplifting. It's energizing. That's what I'm using right now. And then the THC I'll save just for nighttime, or when my appetite's not great, or
When
when
you-
I need to be
So do you use the indica at night? Would you,
I-
because it's a
yeah,
little more
I do.
standard.
more
yeah.
sedating, and the
Very
sativa
much,
during the
very
day,
much so.
right?
We should
So-
jump in about the CBD though. 'cause
Yeah,
everyone's
CBD.
everybody's
Very
talking about
important.
CBD.
Yes.
So that's-
So, but that's the important part is when I can get a strain where I have a high THC percentage, and then a percentage, so say like a 22 to 24 type THC,
Yeah.
and then I get a 2.5 to 3% CBD inside of that, and then also, you know, some of those other compounds like CBN or something like that you're not going to get as much. But if it's around a 0.5 or so, like that's a really good balance. But then, I mean,
well, that's very interesting because I mean I've seen from our experience that, you know, we're prescribing a lot of, you know, high CBD oils.
Right.
I mean that's what I'm seeing a lot of, you know, people with
Yeah.
arthritis, seniors
Yeah.
that we're giving.
Yeah.
How are you seeing effect with those types of, you know,
Oh,
people telling you that
for
these
sure.
things
And by the
work?
way, again, you hit on a really key point. I think it's really important to understand the societal change that we're facing.
Yeah.
There's more patients that are looking like me, you know, because the population is getting older, and patients are oftentimes looking for a solution where they can have medical cannabis, but you got to understand too, you don't necessarily have to get high, or you're going to get high as a result of it.
Right.
CBD is not only a great option for that, but it helps you achieve homeostasis, which is the most important point, and just keep
So you
things,
don't
level.
get that high effect from the CBD
No.
that you would from the THC, right?
I think I
There will be
usually
THC in it, depending on the ratio.
Right.
You know,
Hybrids
You
or-
may feel, well, you'll get them in sort of 1-to-1 or 4-to-1,
Right.
25-to-1, and so on.
Yeah.
And you know, I typically use a 4-to-1 at night,
Okay.
because for me too, the interesting thing is if I go super high CBD, if I go to 25-to-1, or in rare occasions at 100-to-1, you can't get that very often. But I find it's very alerting, and actually I don't sleep.
Oh,
Ah.
interesting.
But in other people, that doesn't happen. So I have to get that ratio right. So for me, a 1-to-1 or a 4-to-1 works really, really well.
And the genetics test is coming on CBD metabolism as well. It's just
So
not
perfect,
ready yet, but it's
perfect.
coming.
Yeah.
So that's
good.
That's an
really
interesting part
important,
as well.
Really
Yeah.
important.
so it's nice to cover off the people that actually do respond to low doses of CBD. That's great. But then let's talk about the people that really don't.
Right.
So in my instance, I mean, I'm not really a CBD user outside of inhaling as part of my THC. I've done CBD isolate. I've done smaller doses of CBD oil, and I've been told that I'm probably going to need in between 600 and 800 milligrams a day.
Wow.
So I think the most potent CBD oil right now per mil, legally in Canada, is around 100 milligrams per mil, which is pretty good. But if I'm needing
That's a
6
lot
of
of
those,
CBD.
That's a lot of money.
That's
a lot of
cost,
money.
that-
and
and
so
taxes and
when you look at CBD right now and THC in Canada, and it's such a young market, they're really in direct competition of each other. So it makes then the dosing end up similar because your affordability. So it's, if you're responding on low doses of CBD, maybe you're a
Slow metabolizer.
slow metabolizer.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, so, I mean, for the people like me that need really 10 times the amount of CBD than THC, on a daily basis, I can probably tolerate 55 milligrams of THC oil. And if I'm at the 600 mark with CBD, then, I mean, things have to change
And the pricing.
in the market, the pricing.
Yeah.
Got a couple of other questions.
Yeah, and just I know I want to talk about supply. Like I want to talk about just generally,
Sure.
what do you recommend? What are people saying about problems with getting product when they order off LPs? You know, with the rec market coming, what do you recommend people should be doing? Should they be going to that ordering from that side, or you know, to address this issue or not? Like,
Yeah, so so it's a great question, and frankly, it's a pretty big topic. You know, I see, you know, supply issues, frankly, when patients face them, is not so much supply issues as how they manifest themselves for that patient, meaning it all of a sudden becomes a health crisis. So it's very much in that zone. So I think number one, we have to start looking at that issue separately. And it really talks to different, you know, access challenges within the system. Because if you look at the Health Canada numbers that are published, and the Health Canada doing a great job publishing those on a monthly basis now. And if you look at the patient demand, and they break it down by flower and oil, but the flower to patient demand ratio is something like 7-to-1. So there's about 7 supply to 1 patient demand.
Yeah.
So that means that there's supply.
there's supply.
But because of the 1-to-1 relationship that patients have to have with their licensed producer,
Right.
you're seeing supply through a very small window. So there may be supply, but you're seeing supply. So if you don't get your strain within that supply window, then you're going to say it's a supply issue. So, one of the things that I think we have to look at in a bigger picture, frankly, which is that, if you look at where medicine is going anyway, you're looking at sort of the patient empowerment side of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, the system that we have today is very similar to if you had a credit card with a limit on it, and that limit was held at a store, and you were told you can only use that credit limit at that store.
Yeah.
Then that, by definition, is a problem for you, right? And that's what we have today in the medical system.
Good analogy.
Because of the, because of the limit side. But I think patients should be able to have the democratization, and be able to shop anywhere.
Yes.
So I think that really is a bit of a system issue that is something that
So the problem is,
we've got to look at.
right now, if you want to switch licensed producers, you need to contact your doctor or nurse practitioner to ask for them to change your prescription and send it to a new licensed producer, which is a hassle.
And on that note, Health Canada have made it easier. But the fact is, you're still playing whack-a-mole with licensed producers, because somebody might say, hey, that licensed producer has the strain you're looking for. You go there, next month they don't.
Right.
What are you going to do, switch again?
Yeah, it's a hassle.
So it really is,
not
and
a-
again, going back to patients are patients for a reason. They don't want to be doing this. So
Right.
it really is a challenge.
Yeah.
Let's just do the last few questions because I think we're ending soon. How do you have to disclose medical cannabis use to your employers? What is there?
We've heard on this lately, right? Cannabis had a section on this.
Yeah. So, I mean, as a patient, you have the right to
Keep it private,
keep
right.
it to yourself, right? The real challenges come up when it's a safety sensitive
Right.
position. I think when it's a safety sensitive position, you have to look at it.
So if you're a
It's
driver, a
different.
You're
forklift
operating.
driver,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
whatever, things like that, then you need
But
to.
I think a lot of
becomes
companies
issue.
now are putting in place certain requirements,
Yeah,
like
they're
they
putting
would for
changing
smoking,
policies
their
and-
so I think
Right.
those are
That's right.
evolving. Yeah.
Okay. How do we eliminate the stigma of the typical stoner mentality, man?
So I mean,
And
we're doing it right now.
Yeah,
This,
that's right.
this kind of stuff
Yeah.
is.
That's right.
I'm high. People would call me a stoner. I've been high all day. I'll probably be high for the rest of my life.
There you go.
I'm not a stoner. I've worked in industry. I've done financial services. I mean,
think
And he
the
actually
other-
does it well.
I think we just.
I think the other thing is you're using
That's a
medical
great
cannabis
question.
to not be high. You're using
Right,
it to
right.
treat your symptoms
Right.
and your ailments and illnesses. So we have to start
That's right.
distinguishing it that way.
And-
But what does
What's high
a
mean?
stoner
Right.
look
I
like,
mean,
right?
yeah.
I mean,
Right.
I don't know.
we kind of know. Yeah, I mean, we know with someone struggling on opioids, we know what
Right.
that looks like.
We
but
definitely
do.
do.
Do we really know what a stoner looks like? I mean, they're just
Yeah.
different people
Yeah.
using medication.
And
Yeah.
the other thing too is that, medical cannabis is become, like, it's really become an enabler for people to be able to work, be able to
Correct.
function, be able to make it, again, that
It helps
that is
depression.
not in the,
it helps
the stoner
anxiety.
category at
Oh,
all.
yeah.
So yeah, for sure.
Do you want to talk about autism?
Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah,
in
I mean,
terms of
I can
experiences
just
that
say
you've
that
had? Yeah.
patients are parents are coming and saying, hey, that they're giving their children CBD oil and who have autism and they're seeing great effects. So that's all I can say. It's anecdotal.
Right.
We have to be careful. We do advise and look. This
So
is
for-
sitting on
you
the
know,
edge.
That's an important thing, though. I mean, this is where I think CBD has a massive benefit in if the risks are slow, if the psychosis
Is
factors
low.
aren't
That's
there,
right.
if all of these things, I mean, what's the harm? Like,
Yeah.
it should actually be a superfood, and it should be as a preventative medicine. So, I mean,
And a
what
lot of
really
the
is the harm?
LPs now are actually, doing this important research, right? Collecting the data in real world practice.
Right.
You don't need randomized controlled trials to look at the effects of CBD in children that have autism. Genetic testing is going to be key for those patients. So we can collect that information in a relatively short period of time and have the results we want.
For sure.
I mean, CBD's already coming to foods, right? Like, just what happened with goji berries
Yep.
and all these new, and the turmeric and all this
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, in 2 years, you won't be able to get enough of it.
Correct. Yes, it's here to stay.
The other sort of point that we haven't touched on, but I think it's really important, is really the socioeconomic benefit of medical cannabis, and we're seeing that more and more. I mean, the research is starting to come out, but and this is why, in a lot of ways, I think governments are, and that governments at all levels, whether it be federal, provincial, or muni, aren't really looking at it in the right context, because I mean, medical cannabis, again, it's an enabler of humans to be able to
Function.
continue to work,
Right.
to function, to
Yeah.
make it happen. So, so there's a lot that is really going on. So, and when you tax it the way you are, you know, you're disincentivizing the use of something that actually contributes to the productivity of the nation, you know, and even at the municipal level, you have less drain on social service and so on because people are well. And I think that's a whole area that we're gonna have to look
Okay,
at.
last 5 minutes,
So
let's do this
so
piece,
we
right?
just got,
results?
Yes.
we just
Wow,
got
there
Gerald's
you go.
test
Drum
results.
roll.
So I'm
okay
normal
for-
except,
You're
the
normal.
except the last
No.
one.
Is
where,
it okay for me to disclose? I'm asking
Oh yeah,
for
go
consent.
ahead.
for it.
Let's
Okay.
go.
Ready.
I'm
Okay.
surprised at the results.
Okay,
Have you
so
seen it?
I'm just going to
Let's see.
show people the way the test result comes back. Yeah, so it's three enzymes or 3 genes that we're looking at. The first one was to metabolize THC, so your CYP2C9. So you're coming back as normal.
That's good.
So
That
you
means
can
you're not a
metabolize.
fast metabolizer. That would actually make
Right.
sense.
Right.
Makes
Yeah.
sense. So the other 2 are the AKT1 is looking at psychosis, your risk of psychosis compounded with using THC, and your average, so
good.
normal, not to worry about that. Where there is a bit of a red flag is for your comp enzyme, so a likelihood of developing memory loss. You are at a
While
high
you're-
risk of developing memory loss while you're using THC.
Which can be a benefit actually.
Yeah,
Well,
if you
we'll
could
talk about
choose
that,
to,
right? It's
yeah.
normally me with the memory
Yeah.
loss.
So this would actually sit with the patient chart, Dr. Goel.
Yeah.
How would you use that then? This is something that the patients at Spark would be getting. So it would go into their chart and then.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
as the you know nurse educator or the physician is sitting down with the patient, would then help them to guide. Okay, what type of strain are we going to recommend here to the
Right.
patient?
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I think, you know, I
So,
think
so
this is
you've got
interesting.
the strain profiles and then map to
Yeah.
Correct.
understanding exactly what happens.
Correct.
here.
And
That's
based
great.
on
That's
his
huge.
symptoms too. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Right. That's huge.
yeah.
And is James's one's coming or is his?
I
might
think
take-
I think it might take a little bit
Okay,
longer
well,
because we
might
started.
update you
Gerald's
on next
chart.
next
Yeah.
episode then.
Well, but it is
Um,
coming.
Okay,
yeah.
so if there's any, what we might do is,
See if there's any more questions.
anybody?
Animals. What
Yes.
about
Animals.
Okay, let's talk for 2 minutes about
Oh,
animals.
I
So
don't know about
I
animals.
mean, I had patients coming
Yeah.
telling me that they're giving it to their dog and
Yeah.
he's suffering from cancer
But
and
this
and
is,
things like
I mean,
this.
this is important for me to talk about animals for 30 seconds because it's what did they call it when patients the nocebo effect and all? I mean,
Placebo.
The
that's
placebo, yeah.
placebo, nocebo, and all this kind of.
I
It's
like
invented
that.
words.
Well,
Nocebo.
nocebo
I was
is-
thinking to start
yeah.
using that one.
That's the French word.
Well, that's that's based
No,
on
it's
fear
le
mongering
placebo.
and stuff. But what better way than to, as long as we know that they're not harming animals. So let's get out there right now and say that CBD is all over the place with animals, and but what better way to actually see without bias on how a medication works, right? We get to see it in epilepsy because we physically see seizures going away, and we get to see it in autism, and we get to see it in animals, really. So, I mean, I would use the animals as just, I mean, great for the animal,
Bottom line, it's an emerging
and
science.
it's going to give
It
you
is.
That's what it
unbiased
is.
Lots
information.
more,
It's an
lots
emerging
more
science.
research.
All right. So if anybody's interested to come on into Spark, just put your name in or direct message us in the group. And I think we're giving away a vape so just go ahead and put your name in and
Oh, that's
Cool.
great.
we'll do that draw at some we'll do that separately off
That's
the
great.
show.
Sure.
And how can patients find you?
Yeah, how can they?
Yeah, so they can go to our website, CFAMM.ca, or our don'ttaxmedicine.ca site too. So
Okay, we'll
to-
put those
to
up in the thread so
participate
people can
in,
see
yeah,
that.
for sure.
That's
Great.
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 Thank you
Great.
so much.
Thank you.
All right.
It's a really pleasure to
Thank you.
connect.
Thank
Yeah, I
you.
really
Thanks.
enjoyed
Thank you.
chatting with you. Thanks so
Sandra.
much.
All right,
Okay.
everyone. Thank you so much.
You're
See you
normal
next
after
time.
all.
Bye.